Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen. I am glad that you guys continually tune in to make this your number one show in our target audience. I'm certainly glad to have you all with us on today. If you're coming in today, I want you to tag, and share this conversation for those who are in our social media stream. And if you're listening to us on the FM dial at 107.1, that was good, 107.1 FM. I certainly appreciate you for tuning in. I want you to know that you can find this show and all of the shows at kisswtlz.com. You can go there and find podcasts of all of your favorite shows, listen to them into their entirety. So we want to thank you for continually coming in. I got with me in the studio my main man, Matt. I was trying to figure out what exactly I was going to call you. I'm going to come up with a station name for you. Right now, I'm thinking about White Soul. People don't know who you are. They don't know anything about you. But we certainly thank you for being here today. What's good with you, my man?
I'm doing pretty good this weekend. I've had a lot of homework this weekend due to me starting college, but other than that, I've just been chilling. What about you?
The start of another college season. For those of you who are listening, I am suffering from lack of earphone-itis. I heard something when you did something over there, Matt, but I'm struggling other than that. But no, I'm having a great time. So it's the beginning of a school year. So many of you students out there are experiencing a new school year. So what is it like? What are you anxious? Are you excited? How has the beginning of this new school year started?
Well, I was really nervous the first day. Like I did not get any sleep that night. But after my first day, like I realized that, I got this in the bag. Like I'm gonna get all A's or all A's and B's this year. Like I love my teachers. I'm planning on taking a class with one of my friends next semester. We didn't do it this semester, but hopefully next semester. But yeah, it's just overall been a really good time. I see some of my friends over at Carleton because of their dual enrollment, but yeah, it's overall pretty good.
All right. Matt says something that I want every young person that's out there. If you're listening to this, I want you to know that you got it in the bag. You got it. You can do it. This is a great time, a great place to stay, to start, to get going, to make great things happen. I want to thank you. I believe we see Cerise Steele Phillips as the first person. Great evening to you as well. Let's continue to tag, and share this conversation. Today, we're going to talk. There's nothing else, honestly, in my whole being, in my mind, in my thought, that I would be able to talk about other than what I experienced over this past week. And that is something called the Reclamation Project of the GU 272. So I want to share a little bit about my experiences, what we're going to talk today. As I had an opportunity to go back and trace some of those ancestral lines. I'm curious to know how many of you out there have ever done the 23andMe, are a part of Ancestry.com, any of those tools that help you find where you are through genetics, through family trees, through information searches and databases. We're going to talk a little bit about that today because I had a crazy experience over the past 4 days that really has changed and shaped how I see me and how I view me as a person, but have really impacted my life in such a way. And I want to share some of that experience with you. But you know how we do. We always start out by talking about what's on my mind. Okay, if Woodstock was not enough, if Live Fest and all the other fests were not enough, there is a certain population in this country that is continually trying to create the biggest version of a quote-unquote Woodstock around. And I'm talking about this latest project, which is called Burning Man Festival. I have no idea what that. Do you know what the Burning Man Festival is? Have you heard of that?
No, I personally haven't. No.
Okay, so there's something called the Burning Man Festival. And during this festival, which takes place in Black Rock Desert in Nevada, there was an extreme storm that came through, dumping tons of water. And if anybody understands anything, people would think, oh, well, if there's water in the desert, it should work well. The desert should just soak it up. It don't work that way. So there's 70,000 people who are stranded out in the desert because there was an extreme storm that came through, dumping tons of inches of water in the desert, causing flooding everywhere. Roads are washed out. People cannot get out. And the People are out there saying, hey, we got to conserve water. They're telling them to conserve water, conserve food, and to shelter in place. So Burning Man Festival has essentially now become a mud festival, and people are out there stranded in the desert for another concert experience. My question is this: how far is too far? Is there a place that we draw the line in terms of these concert going experiences? I know I got into a little trouble with a few of you all when I was talking about how far we allow ourselves and how much we allow ourselves to be exposed to as it relates to concerts. But how far is too far? I'm not going to a concert in the desert. I'm sorry. I remember probably about 3 or 4 years ago, this is when Kanye West was having his God complex. He was having people come out to the desert, and they were having church services and sing-alongs in the desert. I thought that was a bit different. It seemed a little bit cultish to me, but it appears as though that Kanye is long gone. But hey, it's all good. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, that this day in American history. And notice I didn't say Black history, because Black history is American history. And so this day, as we look back in American history, one of America's greatest orators of all time, Frederick Douglass, not Les Brown, Frederick Douglass, born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, escaped from slavery to freedom on September 3rd, 1838. Now, I want you to remember that year. Those of you who are listening, 1838, because it's a very significant year. So he escaped from slavery to freedom on September 3rd, 1838. While dressed in a sailor's uniform to conceal his identity, Douglass traveled from Maryland by train, steam ferry, steamboat, and foot to New York City and freedom in less than 24 hours. This brother was running like Sha'Carri Richardson, national world champion. In less than 24 hours, born a slave, Douglass, after escaping slavery, became one of the world's most foremost abolitionists and human rights leaders. Shout out to you, my man, Frederick Douglass. Just an update. There are a number of things that I need to make sure that we are all aware of that are happening in our community that are so vitally important for you all to be a part of. Next, we have something called the Man Up the Return. I've spoken with you all before about the Man Up Forum, and before I was on the radio, I was doing something called the Man Up Forum that literally traveled from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. We had partnerships with Walmart and Best Buy and all kinds of corporations, bringing in athletes and celebrities that were talking and having conversations with our young boys and men, really challenging us to create dialogue. I really believe that we can change anything that we can talk about, anything that we can have a conversation about. So the Man Up the Return is taking place. My good guy, Brian Pruitt, who is a beast in connecting with young people, he reached out to me and said, yo, Kareem, we got to bring it back. Do you mind? Let's bring back Man Up. So we are going to bring it back. Some of the other people that will be a part of this, Hurley Coleman. There will be musical entertainment by Charles Allen. You know him from the American Idol saga. September 16th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Mothers, brothers, uncles, cousins. If you are a man or if you are a young man, we're looking at ages 12 and older, I believe. We want you to be in the place. This is September 16th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Somebody saying where at Thompson Middle School, 3021 Court Street. You've heard a lot, and it's interesting, but all things have been focusing and turning toward engagement of young men and boys in our community. There has been a concerted effort of so many organizations and groups that are targeting getting in the space and the face of these young men to begin to have these conversations. Why, someone says, why now? Because we're seeing that the things that are happening in our community, they're not the 40-year-old crowd, but there is a particular group of young people, adolescents between 18, actually probably 15 to about 30 that we find involved in most things. And so we want to get in front of them, begin to have some conversations with them. This Man Up the Return at Thompson will include food, games, giveaways, haircuts, massages, and empowerment. We want them to leave encouraged and empowered. Sponsors of this great event are CAC, Saginaw Faith-Based Fatherhood Connection, and of course POD, that is Power of Dad. Once again, September 16th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It is Man Up, the return. So make sure that you're a young man, your men are a part of this. Churches, pastors, ministers, let's get involved. We're going to pack that place out. We're going to give some positivity. We're going to give some insight. We'll have a straight talk panel where we have some serious straight talk. Anybody who knows me will understand that I don't do well with sugarcoating things. Not that I want to be mean or rude, but I just like to get straight to the point. I like to be clear. Set clear expectations so that we can be made better. All right, now I got to have a real conversation with y'all, the village, real quick on this next thing. In 2024, there will be something called the Memorial Cup. It's actually the Canadian Memorial Cup coming to the city of Saginaw. Now, many of you don't watch hockey. Many of you don't go down. Back in the day when we were kids growing up, our hockey team was the Saginaw Gears. I remember as a young kid going to the Saginaw Gears, see them play with my cousin Marlo, who was into that sort of thing. Those of you know who Jason Richardson is. He went to so many Gears games that as an athlete, he wanted to be a hockey player. And the way he ended up in basketball was because as he was playing hockey and practicing out Saginaw Bay Ice Arena, he could no longer find skates that were big enough to fit his size 14 feet. And so he recognized that he was probably going to have to change sports. And so he began to play basketball, but he started out as a hockey player. Interesting. It's a sport that many Black folks in our community don't get involved in. We don't play, we don't see, we don't watch. Some of us may watch a game if our team down in Detroit, the Red Wings, makes it to the final. Hockey is a fast-paced, exciting game, which I always thought, like, that's something white people do. We ain't going to no hockey game. It's cold on the inside. But we have learned, some of us are learning to culture ourselves and give experiences to young people that are not normal experiences. Next year, the Canadian Memorial Cup is coming to Saginaw. And it is the national championship of the Canadian Hockey League. It's a consortium of 3 major junior ice hockey leagues that are all combined in one tournament. It's one of the most prestigious and coveted trophies in North American sport. Tens of millions of dollars. Y'all hear me? Tens of millions of dollars are coming to our city. Now, what often happens is when stuff comes in that doesn't really tickle our fancy, like maybe a Garth Brooks concert, or some of you who aren't up on them, maybe Jars of Clay comes in. You'll go down and you'll see the Civic Center, which we used to call it. It's now the Dow Event Center, packed to capacity, people everywhere, and you have absolutely no clue what's going on. This is cannot be one of those occasions. We are, just a number of, not even a year out now, maybe about 6-7 months out from this taking place. Will take place the last week of May into the first week of June. This is going to bring tens of millions of dollars. There were $52 million in the ARPA. This city stands to bring in more money with this hockey tournament than the entire community was fighting over in relationship to ARPA. Now, what is this? What am I saying? And why am I telling our community we've got to position ourselves for this? Because we've got to make sure that we're in position to capitalize on something that's coming to our community. Things that are going to be needed. And I'm thinking about this. Housing. So those of you, let's be smart about this. There's only so many hotels that we have in our community. Anything that gets built right now won't be ready by the time that happens. I don't believe so. But, I've seen things go up overnight. So housing is going to be an issue. Many of these people are going to be the housing, the hotels off of Tittabawassee, down the 75 corridor, skipping BV, of course, over to Frankenmuth. Frankenmuth is going to be a great benefactor in what's coming to the city of Saginaw. Listen to me, my people. Frankenmuth is a destination spot. It is a world destination spot. So when something like this comes in, the first place people are going to look, hey, what's What is familiar? What have I heard of? And the only thing that people have heard of in this area, other than Dow Chemical, is Frankenmuth. So Frankenmuth is going to get a ton of these dollars that are coming in for this particular thing. However, there's a way for you to get involved. And for smart folks, there's something called Airbnbs. Have you ever stayed in an Airbnb, Matt?
I personally have not. No,
You have not.
I've stayed at hotels, but not in Airbnb.
Okay, and so there's Airbnbs and things of that nature where you can take your house, you can commission it as an Airbnb. People can actually lease your space, and you can charge them a per diem on living in your space. Wake up. So some of you that are out there, if you have additional homes, if you have a home that is for sale, if you have a home that you're fixing up at this time, I would say consider thinking about holding on to it for a little period of time, because I'm going to guarantee you, you're going to make much more money. What you might pay, say the average individual pays, I don't know, anywhere from say $900 a month on a mortgage. If you look at what people are making for Airbnbs, if you got a 3-bedroom house, 4-bedroom house, an Airbnb might be able to bring in, $300-400 a day. If you have a bigger home, that means that Airbnb might be, I've stayed at Airbnbs and Verbos around the country that I've paid literally $500 a night to stay in. And they go up sometimes $1,200 depending on the experience. Now, what happens is a family or a couple families come in, they lease your house. That means you have computer access, you have Wi-Fi, not necessarily computers, but you have Wi-Fi, you have television, you make sure that there's towels and things. Whatever the amenities are in your home, they're able to use those, and you charge them a per diem. And there are so many people getting rich off of doing this, and that's the only thing to do. I got a buddy that now lives in Mexico, and he has about 15 homes that are a part of a Verbo or Airbnb. He does both, and he leases his house with a per diem, and he gets paid. He sends someone to clean them up, sends someone to manage them, and he is making money. These are the types of things that if you don't have a brick and mortar restaurant or a number of places like a hotel or apartments that you can have, these are ways that we can get into the game. Somebody go get mad that I'm telling y'all this. I can feel it right now, but I'm telling you, if you're hearing me, that is something to consider. I'm personally considering this myself for the home that I live in right now. It's worth. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
It's actually kind of funny you bring that up, because me and my mom actually just had the same conversation, because she's thinking about renting out our house for the Memorial Cup.
Do you see what I'm saying? People are doing this all over the place, and we will be the last ones to the party. So let's think about how we can capitalize on this. Okay, that's housing. Now, the other thing that's going to be necessary, and this has been part of the problem for the city of Saginaw, for those of you who are listening, it's going to be important for us to create an atmosphere for those individuals that are coming where you literally have 18-hour living. What do I mean by 18-hour living? Because you're going to sleep for 8 hours of the day, right? So that means that if you're sleeping 8 hours of the day, 68 hours of the day, you need 18-hour living. That means that you have to have places where you can get small things, needle and threads and snacks and convenience store types things. Just make sure people don't try to take over your house and refuse to leave. That is so very true. Make sure that your contract and things of that nature are ironclad. And you probably would like to get something drawn up by an attorney or someone else. Speak to someone else who's already in the business. You're absolutely right. You end up with squatters and spending more money to get those people out that you have made during that period of time. But there needs to be types of things. 18-hour living, that means that we don't have food. We don't have any chain restaurants that are downtown. So that means that places like Rita's downtown, Valerie's downtown, are really in a position to do something great. There's some empty spaces that are downtown that we need to make sure that we get into and we provide food. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There is a food truck craze that is now happening in the city of Saginaw, which is crazy to me, because about 20 years ago, when I was out in California and spending a lot of time on the West Coast, that was where everybody ate. We ate off of food trucks, taco trucks, and sushi trucks was the way that you did it. And we were just like, wow, we thought it was weird when we went out there. And had we thought about it, we would have been preparing for that type of thing to come here to the Midwest. It is now here. So if you don't have a food truck, begin to look, what would it cost for you to invest in food truck if you do something well? If there's, we're going to need cakes and desserts, but food is going to be so essential. There are 3 meals a day that most people eat, and most people snack in between. There is a great opportunity for you to make your impact and receive some of these dollars for the community by providing food for the individuals that are coming here. And we're talking, well, there's a taco truck. Well, you know what? Figure out what it would take for you to get a taco stand. Figure out what it means for you to get it. And then another thing, merchandise, bottled water. You know, you go to Cedar Point and people are selling bottled water for $5. And guess what? You buy it because you go to the next one and the water might be $7. So bottled water, all types of things, selling merchandise, Saginaw merchandise, gear that represents the city, I think is going to be so important. Let's put together a plan that we can capitalize, and maybe the dollars that we raise can be used to bring longevity to some of the programming that we've done with ARPA. ARPA dollars will run out. You know, maybe we can make some money during the Memorial Cup, the Canadian Memorial Cup when it comes into town, and we can add some longevity by putting finances into those areas and those programs. So I'm excited about it. It is a great opportunity. This is also a great opportunity. Saginaw, listen to my people. Listen to me, people. One of the things that we often ask is how much they're going to pay us. But when things like this come to your community, there's something called ambassadorship that becomes very, very important. And what I mean by that is there's some things that you want to make sure when something like this cup comes into the city, the whole world is watching. That means that is where we want to make sure that when they come to Saginaw, we are cordial. We invite them. We don't look at them as outsiders because those outsiders have dollars in their pocket, but we treat them. We're very hospitable. The other issue that there's going to be shuttle transportation, getting people from one place to another. Dr. Hayes, Word of Faith, if you're listening, oh my God, you're at ground zero. You're right on the other side. You have parking lots available. You are in the position to have a gold mine. Let's not close and clank our doors and parking lots. Let's open them up. You can charge, $5 to $10 for parking, provide a shuttle from one place to another. If you're out there and you're looking for a hustle and you don't necessarily have a job or able to work, there's some situations that people got that they're not necessarily able to be gainfully employed in certain areas. You can start a shuttle service where you pick people up from certain destinations and drop them off, because when you have this many people coming into a town, you got to get your hustle hat on. Some of us are lazy and wait for other people to bring us into opportunities. You should start brainstorming right now, making sure you have the licenses and the credentials and everything that you need to be a part of what's getting ready to go down. Because once it's happening, once it's here 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before, you are too late and you're going to be shut out of a great opportunity. And it will be nobody's fault but our own. Y'all hear me, my brothers and sisters? Let's make this happen. Good evening to you also, Dr. Mamie Thorns. We certainly appreciate you. We know that we have a time that we're going to be celebrating our new president out at Saginaw Valley State University. I did get my invitation. I'm excited about that opportunity and what that means for this community. So let's be smart, Saginaw. Let's not wait. I know that we always wait to the last minute, but I know I've seen a lot of young entrepreneurs that are getting their hustle on. I just gave you some viable suggestions. There's some other things that I'm keeping close to my chest that I think that I'm going to be providing. But let's make sure that we get out there, we get our entrepreneurial hustle on, but let's also make sure that we're providing the love and the compassion of the human spirit, that we're making Saginaw an inviting city. When you see people on next year coming that are not a part of our community, be very kind. Ask them where they're from. Tell them it's a great joy to be in Saginaw. Let's spend some time volunteering during this period of time. There's going to be so many needs, passing out flyers and information about the community. So many opportunities for us to get involved. I was speaking with Dick Garber, who is really, and we should applaud him. I don't know if there's an icon or a great businessman, whatever the word. He is the greatest philanthropist in our community. That includes major corporations that are here. He sows more into our Saginaw community than any other entity, and I say that intentionally. Any other entity be it a corporation or individual. He is the person who is bringing this to the city of Saginaw. So this is an opportunity for a lot of those organizations that he supports, those programs in our community, those baseball leagues, to roll up your sleeves and volunteer for some of the things that have happened. Let's make Saginaw great. This is really a test. It's a litmus test for other things that we can bring in our city. I know a lot of y'all want to change the name of Saginaw from the nasty to Saginaw Awesome. Well, if you want it to be Saginaw Awesome, it's time to roll up your sleeves. Let's do the work. Let's communicate greatness. Let's begin to work together. Let's plan partnerships. Let's build great opportunities. Let's come together around ideas that bring and empower the entire community. Because I'll tell you this, if this comes in and this is not an entire Saginaw thing and our communities of color are not a part of this process, it's not a success. For something to be truly successful in the city of Saginaw, all of Saginaw has to be a part of this. Let's make it happen. We've got the potential and the power to make great things happen. All right, I just want to give a couple of shout outs before I have to turn the page. Help, we've heard about it. Healing, engagement, love, and presence. Those powerful men that we've been talking about. They were here on my show a couple of weeks ago. We have been just absolutely overwhelmed. When I tell you overwhelmed, Matt, say overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Okay, yes, that's exactly what we have been. Completely overwhelmed at the response that we have gotten. And I think that it's so important that I want to say thank you, Saginaw. We haven't even gotten started. We've done a couple of things. We've made ourselves present in some situations. We are now putting the dotting I's and crossing T's. For those parents who have, said, "Hey, I got a grandson, I have a son, or that I need to be involved." I want you to understand something. When we begin to make this thing move, and we're talking in the next few weeks, we'll be putting a clearing call. We'll be sending out letters. We created a database with all the young people whose names have come in, those young men. When we begin to get going, I need you to understand there's a couple of things that we're going to be focusing on based upon what we've heard so far. We're going to get together this week, solidify some things, and the focus for our group starting out is going to be mentoring and engagement of young men. That is the number one thing that we're hearing is needed in our community. It's not too late. If you are a solid man, and this means that you're a man, who you are, and you want to be involved, and you've put away some of your childish things, because we've all done foolish things in our past. I'm not concerned so much with your past is, as long as your past ain't dealing and touching young boys and young girls, which we are also going to have to make sure we take a look into. But if your past is something that you're no longer connected to, we need you. If you have a desire to empower, to impact, to inspire, to assist, to mentor, to help young men, we're calling for you. Now, young ladies, we are going to come after those young ladies very shortly because there's been a call for that as well, but we're focusing on those boys. The key areas we're going to be working with are professional development, job readiness, job creation, starting with an expungement clinic that we have with some heavy hitters that are coming into town. I want to thank our state rep, Amos O'Neill, and our illustrious mayor, Brenda F. Moore, for assisting us in this process. We think that this is going to be absolutely amazing. And I just want you all to know that we can make this happen. We're going to be doing some training for mentors, for youth, and for parents to make sure that we're doing this thing and making an impact that is everlasting. Someone who was very dear to my heart said, impressions are temporary, but an impact is everlasting. All right, and we're going to be making that transition into our schools. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to share with you my process or my path that I went through on a journey from Africa back to the United States and finding the roots and the people from whence I came. Stick, stay, don't go away. We'll be back with more of Straight Talk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you're welcoming back to Straight Talk. We certainly thank you for continually listening. Okay, Salt and Pepper. I see you, Laura Jones, out there. Laura Jones, big ups to you. A lot of great things on the horizon. We see you. We see what you're doing. I know that there's some things coming up that I want you to understand. Jordan Smith, he says in our social media stream, River Reed Notary, doing what we do surpassingly well. If you need a notary in person or mobile, he says give him a call. Check him out in the social media stream. That's right. We got folks out here doing all kinds of things. I gotta let y'all know something, man. This weekend I had the most life changing experience that I could have ever imagined. I did not know when I began to embark upon this process that it would impact me in the manner in which it did. And I want to just share some of this. I asked at the beginning of the show which of you were individuals that have ever done like the 23andMe, the genealogy charts, Ancestry. There's so many of these out there, and that are helping you to find out where you come from, that kind of thing. Well, I'll start off by saying that my family has, for a long time, we have made or we've taken opportunities to try to do a number of things, reconnecting with folks in our past, doing the lineage search and all those things. I am a member of Ancestry.com, and I would continually run into roadblocks. Growing up as a kid, I knew that we grew up in Maringouin, Louisiana. We would go down and visit my great grandmother in Maringouin, Louisiana. But I had no idea what I was in store for this weekend. And I'm just going to try to give you a small piece. I can't give you everything. I went down to Maryland. There's a city called California, Maryland. Never heard of it in my life. And there is a group of individuals called the GU 272. I'm going to share with you what they are. That was having what we would call, I guess, in essence, a reclamation project that they were putting together. So, those of you who are listening, many of our listening audience, you know that I am cousins with Essie Pate the Burks. I'm killing her name right now. She was born in the city of Saginaw, but she really is a native of Detroit. She went to school and was raised there. Went to Broadway, done some amazing things. Won a Tony for colored girls who committed suicide when the rainbow wasn't enough. She went on Pee Wee's Playhouse. Law and Order, the senior actor on Law and Order for many, many years as the lieutenant there. She is now on Chicago Fire. She's won awards for Lackawanna Blues, all kinds of things she's done as it relates to the world of entertainment and media. She produced a number of things, so I knew that this is something that was very dear to her heart. There is a documentary that she did with Whoopi Goldberg. I believe Whoopi does the narration. And it was talking about Black benevolent societies. And I watched that a couple of times. And I think it was called Fremont or Fairmont Black Benevolent Societies. Go check that out, stream it. You can find that, pull it up, watch it. But she called and told the family, hey, fam, I'm going to be on this next episode of something with Lewis Gates, who's a good friend of hers, titled Finding Your Roots or Finding Our Roots. And she was on the show with Michael Strahan. And many of you have heard me talk about it. Yes, Law and Order was your favorite. I got you, Charisse. Many of you have heard us talk about it. I'm not sure if I've done a show with her since then. She has been on the show, called in on the show. She lost her mom, my aunt, Annie. We miss her. It'll be a year this coming November. Absolutely love her. She was my grandparents' favorite sister, my grandfather's favorite sister. And she has gone on to be with the Lord. But in the process of the time before that happened, she was on the show Finding Our Roots. And what we found through the discoveries that they had was that our family, in short, were responsible for keeping Georgetown University open by the selling of slaves. We were the slaves that they sold to keep Georgetown University open. Georgetown was heavily being funded by the church in Rome, which started the church. But they also were reliant on the tobacco fields of Maryland, which eventually began to plummet. Well, when tobacco was no longer producing the way that it was, and cotton became the new kid on the block, that was where it was. But cotton didn't grow well in that area, but it grew in Louisiana. So they were trying to keep Georgetown from being foreclosed. They sold our family. The first name on that bill of sale, which they tried to hide, the first bill of sale that was destroyed because they didn't want folks to know that the Catholic priests, the Jesuit priests, Jesuits are individuals from Rome. They report directly to Rome. They're a part of the Catholic Church. And they're kind of like mission. Each Jesuit is given a mission to do something. Education and the furtherance of the Catholic Church is all a part of that mission. The Jesuits that were here in Maryland, most people don't realize, but when Catholics first came to this new world in the 1600s, they were not allowed to practice as Catholics. They were persecuted themselves in Great Britain and were not allowed to practice or to build churches here in the United States. It was something that I found along the way. And so they came here and they bought up large swaths of land funded by the Vatican, by Rome. And with that land, there was a potential we were eventually going to do something if things should change to build the Catholic Church in the U.S. So the first name on that bill of sale, we found a copy of it in Georgetown's archives while they were looking for my cousin's DNA lineage on finding our roots. The first name on the top of that list was Isaac Hawkins, my fifth great grandfather, who now has a residence hall on Georgetown University named after his name. Now, people are going to be like, where's the money? Where's the money? There is a process even in place. $1 billion has been set aside in a fund for those families who are connected to GU 72 descendants. And it ain't just like, this is why you've got to show the pathway. Luckily for us, that pathway has been done and by Georgetown University. So it's been authenticated. So I went back this weekend, and this is very emotional. I'm going to try to get through this, keeping intact my faculties, because it was a very emotional experience. I took my mom down with me. We let the family know we were going to find out. I didn't know if it was going to be a family reunion or what exactly we were doing. But what I found very quickly is that when we got to the location, the very first day, these were long days. We were literally putting in a full day of work. Showing up at these locations at 9 o'clock in the morning, going to multiple locations, ending our day somewhere around 5 o'clock in the evening. So a full day, but it was worth it. The very first day we went to a place called St. Ignatius Church, St. Thomas Manor at Chapel Point in Maryland. Oh, wow. This is an amazing story. It is an absolutely amazing story, Discovery Laura. And so what we did is we went to this particular location, and this was a location that my forefathers were brought into. When you get to this particular place, it's in St. George's parish or county. They're divided up. And when we got there, the first thing that I noticed is that it was right on the Chesapeake River, which led out to the Chesapeake Bay, which gives way to the Atlantic Ocean. And when we pulled up, these very picturesque things, there are two things that you notice: a huge Catholic church with a steeple on top, and you notice the sloping hills down to the Chesapeake River. Yes, it is absolutely a beautiful area. And they began the tour by sharing. Now, the first, there's a big difference. The first place we went to, the first parish on the first day, was a tour that was led by the Jesuit. It was Jesuit led. And I found out very quickly there's a difference between something that is Jesuit led by our oppressors, the descendants of our oppressors, versus something that was descendant led by my cousins, our people. And so we got there, and he began to tell us the story of how there were graves. The land was low lying along the river. There was a need for more tobacco. At a period of time when they would put the graves in, they would pop up out of the grave when the waters would overswim. And then there was a need for more tobacco crops to be created. And so they dug up what was essentially all of the slave graves, and they pulled them seemingly up closer to the top of the hill. But what we noticed when we got there was that they were all very large tombstones, big headstones and things with names and of people, and it was a white cemetery. So what they did, because there was no space, is it needs to be a documentary. You're absolutely right, Jordan. Is that they created mass graves for those who were slaves, and essentially they brought in infrared technology and found in places where there should have been one body, literally hundreds of bodies that were thrown into these graves. And they plan to do some excavation to find out exactly what and who are in those graves. But by the looks of things, we're certain that they are people of slave. They were our ancestors of slaves who were slaves. We then went in and there was a big discrepancy, and y'all know how I am. This is Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen. The Jesuit priest, God bless his soul, he began to talk about how history has the ability to correct itself, and history corrects itself, and God is in control. These were atrocities, and people talk about how we're going to change history, and he told us that you can't really change history. You just tell it from a different perspective. And everybody in the room was quiet. There was probably about 100 of us that were in the room. There were reporters and historians from Georgetown University and people from the community that were just there because they were interested in the conversation. And in like fashion, like I am, I raised my excuse me, rabbi, priest, friar, trust. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but I had to let him know I didn't come here for a history lesson, American history lesson. When are we going to get to the history that directly relates to our people? And so he told me this history is important. I am a historian. And I said, well, that is great. But many of us here, we understand what American history is. And this is where I was really perturbed. And my mother was sitting next to me going, no, 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 no. I said, Ma, it wouldn't be me if it wasn't me. If I didn't say something, it wouldn't be me. And so we began the conversation and we opened it up, and people were really serious. We have doctors and lawyers and historians of our own that are here. When are we going to get to the information? And so in like fashion, there were family members that were there that said they had came down 8 years earlier to get documentation because this church, which was a plantation. Now, remember I told you they could not have churches, Catholic churches. So what the Catholics did is they came in and they started farming. And initially it was indentured servants. Most Black Americans don't realize that the first Blacks that came to this new world, America, were not on slave ships. Many of them, some of them may have been indentured servants. Many of them, and some of them were very wealthy, who had wealth and owned land and did great things. And that's why I tell you that slavery was a product of the Great Experiment. If you ever get a chance, I need you to go and read about the Bacon Revolt. It talks about how the aristocrats were afraid because they were bringing in all of these new workers to till the land, to grow soils, because Jesuits, these Catholics, could not do what we were doing. And they found in Africa that we were, great builders, that we had two-story buildings. When they came, we weren't running around in loincloths looking crazy. We do that because it's hot. But there was indoor plumbing, and we had gardens, and we were great irrigationists. And so they brought us here for the purpose of that eventually. And some of them worked as indentured servants. They bought from other kingdoms in trade. They came here, they were indentured servants. There were people that came from Britain and Black people from other places who were indentured servants, who had wealth, who were free Black people. It wasn't until they recognized that not only were there too many slaves here, you got to think that we outnumbered them because we were working the gardens, and they were afraid of us. And then there was also the issue that they have of the indigenous folks that they found here, which we refer to as Indians or Native Americans. Those indigenous people, along with these new colored folks, they were getting along with indentured servants from places like Ireland and England that were coming over as indentured servants. Indentured servants are not the same thing as what we would understand as modern day slavery. So for all you white folk who think my people were slaves too, no, stop it. Your people were indentured servants who were treated with humanity and were giving the right. And as a matter of fact, indentured servants, when you came to this new world and you completed your debt that you owned, you were promised 50 acres to be free, because the idea was that you were not to be in servitude forever for a debt that was paid. That was the foundation for what this new world was created. All right. So these people came over, and then, in the 1700s, we now have where, and from the Jesuit priest's mouth, he said, because slavery is so foreign to humanity, and I need y'all to understand this. This white Jesuit priest, he said to me, slavery is so foreign to humanity that they had to figure out a way to keep people in bondage. And so, because they were afraid that those who were elite and were rich were those who were rich were afraid that the poor people would rise up, they had to figure out a way to keep people separated. And they tried all kinds of things, and the thing that stuck was race. It took. So the Bacon Revolt will give you some understanding about how that happened. And so they used race, and race became the factor. So many folks who came into this country from that day forward, they moved from indentured servants to total slavery, hence putting a great need for more slaves in this slave trade. I found out when we were there, we went down to the river's edge where the boats came in. My family came in on a boat titled the Margaret. The Margaret was a ship that came in. It was owned, the slip, or those bodies that were owned were paid for by a man named John Connor in the area. He then, John Carroll, excuse me, John Carroll paid for that. He was creating a town called Carrollsburg in the colonization practice. Carrollsburg eventually became White Marsh Plantation. When he sold it. He sold it with those slaves included in them. And when those slaves were then put there, the total labor became slavery. Now, on White Marsh, which is a plantation that we went the second day, we saw some of the homes. I got pictures of these things that the people were living in, probably double the size of a prison cell. You had entire families in. And they were cultivating the land, tobacco. And, many of the slaves would run away. And they would be caught and paid, $8, $10. My fifth great grandfather had a lot. I have a lot of him in me. There are stories, actual letters of plantation owners in Georgetown records that I've been able to read where he actually ran away, and there were bounties for his head for him to return. Does that have any correlation to White Marsh, Maryland? That is exactly what White Marsh, Maryland is. That entire area was a plantation. When the Jesuits came to the area, they purchased 80,000 acres of land. It's ridiculous to understand. And then eventually they sold to the Catholic Church to build a church. 4,000 of those 80,000 acres in the middle of the plantation, which then became a church. And the church then continued to function in that area. When we went over to the other plantation, which was White Marsh on the first day, this is where we found the headstone of my fifth great grandfather in pictures. But as they were excavating the land, because the Catholic Church was trying to figure out how can we keep this church functional, they said, well, there's a cemetery we can add to it by clearing the land. As they were clearing the land, every 5 feet, they kept running into stones that were, the land was run over. Then they decided to clear it by hand, and they saw a sequential pattern of these headstones, what were eventually called headstones. And in bringing in sonar technology, you can find out what's below the surface without digging. They realized that what had happened was all along the graves, all along the property, just as far as you could see, there were bodies of slaves that had been thrown into holes. And that was their eternal resting place, on top of each other. And so they started to bring out and pull these little pink flags, and you saw a hillside covered in pink flags along the driveway. This entire new church had been placed on top of a burial site of our slaved ancestors. It was the most dramatic, the most emotional moment I think that I experienced along the way. To see the place where my ancestors came in on the ship, the Margaret, to now see that those that died, that didn't die in the middle passages, but made it to land, now just thrown all on the hillside, and there's signs, don't step ancestral burial grounds. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to dig them up, how they're going to put them in a place that that they could have some type of reckoning with what's going on. And so there's been grant monies. They got national archaeologists coming in doing this work. And we went up there and we took a walk up to the side of this place. And when I tell you there is a hillside that is littered with names, the tombstones have been removed to the top of the hill. And literally everywhere you could go, everywhere you could step, everywhere you could drive, there were pink little flags representing bodies. And they began the process of excavation in some areas, already finding over 600 bodies that was in a small spatial space of this plantation. They're believed that thousands of bodies were just thrown on the sides of the hill. My ancestors that were a part of the White Mark plantation. It was a moment, and I had to take a moment to decompress because I was so angry and so mad that someone could be so hateful. In the words of that a Jesuit priest, slavery is so foreign to humanity. As we continued, what we realized, a lot of my family that were there, as I said, it was a kid growing up in Maryland. I thought that's where we were from. When I got to Maryland, I found so many cousins and relatives and great uncles and aunts that I didn't know existed. All of them were Catholic, and I couldn't understand. They're like, how in the world could y'all be Catholics? But what we found as we were talking with the historians from Georgetown University, that when the United States, the colony, allowed, Great Britain ended the war, and Catholics were allowed to then start the Catholic Church in the U.S., the first church, the first diocese, the first bishop that was appointed at White Marsh Plantation. During that planning process, it was my forefathers who were serving tea and making the meals and preparing for the people to come in and taking care of them. They were a part of this new church that was formed. When the new church was formed, they were all converted to Catholicism by force, of course. And so they were the founding members of the Catholic Church in the United States. It took place at White Marsh Plantation, what is now Sacred Heart Church in Maryland. Sacred Heart Church, which is a Catholic church in Maryland. That church was a church that was established and founded, and the membership consisted largely of my Black ancestors. And so many of them say, we built this church. We not only were the first members of this church, but we built the actual first building. We were the servants in the meeting. We were just as essential to the building of the Catholic Church as the people who came in later and took positions. That's their understanding. I feel a little bit different than that, but I can understand it. In that process, we then continued on. We found out that in 1718 that the Margaret came over with my ancestors. I then found out that in 1838, when Georgetown University needed to be saved, we were not only sold to build Georgetown, but in 1838, notice I said at the beginning of the show that in 1838, September 3rd, marking this day, Frederick Douglass ran for his freedom from Maryland. He was at a neighboring plantation to the great state of New York. What I learned in this process is that in 1838, Georgetown was about to be foreclosed upon because tobacco was no longer producing crops, but the plantations in the South were so vitally growing and bursting. Cotton was the new thing. And so the plantation was then sold, the slaves included, and they were put on a ship called the Kate Jackson. Now, this is crazy because I was a fan of Charlie Angel. Kate Jackson and Jacqueline Smith was some of the finest ones. I ain't never been into white women, but if I was going to have a white woman, it would be one of them women. But that's a whole nother story. I digress. But anyways, the name of the ship was the Kate Jackson. And in 1838, the same year that Frederick Douglass ran, who was one of our great abolitionists and orators, ran and for his life, my family was put on a ship. We walked the pathway back to the ship. We saw where they would throw the materials off, throw the ships off the slave, and make them carry the things to the shore, where they would come on and off. How they would have about a 3.5-4 mile walk. We took pictures and took the journey. It was so sobering. I was so thankful for the work that my ancestors did, for the slavery and the pain that they endured, so that we could stand on their shoulders to experience what we have in life. We then went down out of the Chesapeake Bay to the Potomac, to the Atlantic Ocean, around the panhandle of Florida, up the Mississippi River. And then that is where they were sold into slavery, both on the cotton and the sugarcane fields in Iberville, Maringouin, Louisiana, which is where we were told. Now, since then, has been a reckoning, and there is continual conversations. The Jesuits have promised $1 billion to our family. Beginning next year, those who have direct descendants lineage can receive $10,000 a year at any college of their choosing. We prefer HBCUs if we're going to be giving away money. And we are going to begin processes for rebuilding our family's lineage, place setting, creating opportunities for those seniors who may not have wealth to be buried with dignity and with pride, and then also opportunities for other things as we move forward. This has been my journey. It was an emotional journey, but for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a foreigner. I have a legacy. I have a lineage. I have roots in this community. We say that we built this community. I have proof of the grounds in which we were built. Those same slaves, my ancestors, were also responsible for building much of the White House Capitol Loop, the Lincoln Memorial, the National, the White House, the Congress, and the White House. It was an amazing experience that changed me as an individual. I found my true identity, finding that I had roots back to Sierra Leone, Bont's Island in Sierra Leone. So when I go to Africa, I'm not going for a safari. I'm going to see the land of my family, my ancestors, where they were when they came through the one-way doors, coming to this new land called America. I want to thank you guys for your time and attention. This has been an amazing experience. I am yet processing, but I want to reach out to other individuals who are trying to find their roots. There's some tools that we've been given that have been so amazing, finding those archives so that you can find your place in the American history. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. And as always, God bless you. Grace and peace.